she had learned from him. Did Martha not believe that Jesus would raise Lazarus? And the truth is that she didn't. She didn't believe that he was going to rise up again until the resurrection. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. And I don't believe he said it exactly like that. I think he probably said it not as a matter of fact, but in a way where he was comforting her. It's like, Martha, I'm the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, yet shall he live. He shall live again. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. And then he asked her, do you believe this? And she said to him, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. In other words, we believe that you are the person that we've been waiting for. And when she had said these things, she went her way and secretly called Mary, her sister, saying, the teacher has come and is calling for you. As soon as she heard that, she arose quickly and came to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the town, but was in the place where Martha met him. So he was outside the town limits. Then the Jews who were with her in the house and comforting her, when they saw that Mary rose up quickly, went out and followed her, saying, she is going to the tomb to weep there. So they followed her out. Then when Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been there, my brother would not have died. Sound familiar? It's exactly what Martha had said. Same thing Martha said. Could they have been bitterly or in anguish talking about this earlier? It seems so. That would be the humanistic thing to do. Sometimes we look at the characters in the Bible and we always see them as being so perfect, but the way I like to look at it now is that they are just as flawed as we are. They're just as human as we are. And how would I feel if I had asked Jesus, and I knew that I saw him heal countless people, and then I asked him to come and heal my wife, or come to ask him to heal one of my sons. I've seen him heal all these strangers, people that he didn't care about, but yet I know he loves me with a special love. Just like John said, he loved Martha and Mary and Lazarus. But yet he didn't come. And they waited for him, and maybe your wife dies, maybe your son dies. How would you feel? And that's how I think that they felt. Yet they still had faith. Just like when I knew that Seth was probably going to die. Couldn't find a liver for him. We were in the hospital, Sam was in the hospital with Seth waiting for a liver, and 2 close calls but no cigar, and he went from turning yellow to green to gold. And he was probably, the doctor said that he couldn't last much longer at all. Sam was getting her blood test to jump up on the table herself, have part of her liver removed and put into Seth. So at least there was some hope, if that worked out. But then her life would be in danger doing that. And when you're going through things like that, you just think, hey God, I've seen you heal countless other people. You healed my last son, Jack, when he fell out of the back of a van. Wasn't moving, but he still fell out of the back on his head. And God healed him completely by the next morning. There wasn't a scratch on him. There wasn't any swelling or bruising. And he looked like a monster the day before. His pediatrician said, that's very impressive that this is happening. And she looked at us like we were crazy, like we were lying, because of the fact that God healed him. But yet God didn't heal Seth. So I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to hope so greatly in God and then have God seem like he disappoints. But he probably says, even today, Seth has a bad liver and I am glad. I'm glad for your sakes because I'm going to do great things. You can't see them yet. You may never see them. I may never live to see what Seth does with his life. But there's a reason for all of it. And there's a reason for all of our lives. And there's a reason for everything we go through. And God is glad for it, even if we suffer. Not because he wants us to suffer, but because what will come out of the suffering, what will come out of the pain. Therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in the Spirit, not the Holy Spirit, but in his own spirit, and was troubled. The word groan actually means literally snort with anger, like a horse does, He did this in the spirit on the inside of his heart, not openly, so he didn't make any type of show or noise. And he was troubled. Why? Because of the distress of Mary and Martha and all the people with them. He cared, but was also angry. He was angry not toward them, but angry at death. He's angry at the suffering. He's angry at all the things that sin has caused. And I think that if there was ever a temptation for Jesus to be patient, it was because he wanted to see healing once again to mankind. He wanted to see people brought back to God, brought back into a right fellowship with God, but still he had to endure through the rest of his days on earth and throughout the rest of his ministry. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Come, Lord, and see." Or, "Lord, come and see." And then verse 35, the shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept. Jesus wept. You know, you wonder why Jesus wept. You can think of all different reasons. You know, some people thought that he was weeping because Lazarus was dead, which I don't believe so, because he was glad that Lazarus was dead. You could think he wept because he had compassion for Mary and Martha, and that's all true. And you could say he wept over mankind. But even if we don't know the focal point of the fact that he wept, he still wept, showing that God in the flesh has compassion and emotions, much like ours, but in a much purer sense. In Hebrews 4:15 it says, "For we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin." In other words, in order for him to be our perfect high priest, he had to be just like us. He had to feel what we felt. He had to know what we went through. He had to have empathy and compassion for us. And he couldn't do that without becoming a man. And so that's why Jesus is the perfect high priest for us, because he came in the flesh and experienced everything as we have. Not just the temptations, but every emotion, every bit of sadness, and the chance to be depressed, and all the other things that we go through. He understands all of it. So there's not one person that goes through something in this room that can say, well, God doesn't understand, because he's God and I'm human. Jesus was just as human. Not only just as human, but because of his enormous amount of faculties, he could experience everything that everyone experienced, be tempted with everything that everyone's tempted with, and understand it all, so that he could be a perfect high priest. Verse 36, then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." They looked at his tears as someone who just cared about Lazarus. Some of them said, "Could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind," because he had heard about him healing a blind man not long ago, "also have kept this man from dying?" So they start questioning, why didn't this man come? If he was able to heal the blind, why couldn't he come and help his friend? Then Jesus, again, groaning in himself. So I think he continued to groan, continued to feel what he was feeling, which I think has a lot to do with healing. I do. I think it has a lot to do with healing. In fact, the times when God has used me to pray for people to be healed of enormous things, cancer, broken bones, AIDS, things of that nature, the place that God brought me to internally felt just like I'm reading here. Felt like you were just being torn apart. Felt like you were bleeding out for the person you were praying for. And there was a bleeding out of compassion and empathy and love for the person. Love for the person, and love, wanting that person to see their infirmity disappear. And I would go and it didn't matter if I laid hands on them or hugged them or spoke to them on the phone or anything else. That's the feeling that I would have when I would pray for them. And many times people were healed. And now when I pray for people, I always try to get to that same place. Where I empty myself of myself and I fill myself with their infirmity. Not taking on my shoulders or upon my body their infirmity, but taking their burden and bearing it with them and lifting it up to God as we huddle together in front of them. I've seen great healing happen that way. But if you just walk up and go, "Hi, what a great day I'm having today," just went to the beach and caught a few waves, be healed. You know what I mean? And God could heal that person, but that's not the way I see that. If you want to be someone who God uses to disperse gifts of healing, suffer. Suffer and weep and grieve and groan snort, within, be troubled, care. That compassion is what puts you in the place where you can make the connection. And I believe that God can heal in any way. He can heal through someone that is just like happy-go-lucky, joy, joy, joy in the Lord, and then he hands it someone to heal. But I don't normally see that. People that I see that have gifts of healing, that God moves gifts of healing through, are people that oftentimes have the weight of everything upon their shoulders. They look like they're weighed down, and you wonder if they're happy because they're acquainted with grief. There's a lot of grief in their lives because of the fact that they care about everyone that is in grief. And so when you see someone like that, pray for them, but don't think that's because there's anything wrong with them. They may be praying for you. They may be praying about you as they see you and they don't even know you. Groaning in himself, he came to the tomb, and it was a cave, and a stone lay against it. So that was very traditional, that they would hew out a cave out of solid stone or granite, soft stone, and they would just put a body on a platform in there, dressed in like grave clothes. They'd roll the stone in front of it and allow the nature to take its course and have the body decompose and become dust, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. So here was the stone laid against it, and Jesus said, "Take away this stone." Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, "Lord, by this time there's a stench, for he has been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God?" Then they took away from the stone from the place where the dead man was lying. It doesn't say anything about a smell, so there's a possibility that it didn't smell at all. Took away the stone from the place where the dead man was lying, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and prayed and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I thank you that you have heard me." For all along he was speaking to the Father. All along he was praying. All along he was travailing over Lazarus as this man died. And then he just, right before he performed the miracle, he just thanked the Father for hearing him. "I thank you for hearing me. And I know that you always hear me. But because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me." So he said it aloud. Then when he had said these things, he cried with a loud voice. And I'm sure he did this for the sake of everyone that was there. "Lazarus, come forth." I believe with all my heart that he could have whispered it. He could have said it from where he had been before he came into Bethany. He could have done this miracle from wherever, but he was there to glorify God, to show that God is alive and well, and that he has power over death. So he said, "Lazarus, come forth." Lazarus was dead, but Jesus spoke to him as if he were not, that he could hear and obey. Isn't that interesting? Dead people, if they're dead, they can't hear you if you say anything. And he who had died came out bound, hand and foot, with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. So it looked like a mummy, basically. He was walking out with all covered up with all the linens and the spices and everything probably falling off, and Jesus said to him, "Loose him and let him go." Now, I'm not going to go any further than this, but notice that Lazarus was not resurrected, but he was basically just resuscitated in the same body. It was after his body had ceased to function, but that's nothing to God. We see miracles like that all the time without God even being involved. Where someone dies for, a few minutes or something like that, and then they just come back. So, in a sense, they died, and everyone pronounces them dead, and then they come alive. In this case, we know that it had to be a miracle and not just some fluke of science, because the man had been in the grave for 4 days. And they had already wrapped him up. And they definitely would have seen him breathing if he had just been in some semi-animated state or something like